All right, so let's go ahead and talk about yesterday's patch notes. I already did a decent bit of testing and found that there were some hidden changes, and some of the listed changes were not that great in my opinion. Some of them were pretty solid though. One of the really good ones was the change to standing up from ragdolling, down from 0.8 seconds, and it's now only half a second for you to stand up after ragdolling. Now, you know, the reason they said there is a delay at all is because of animations, and it looks super wonky if it's too fast, which makes sense in my opinion. That's totally fair. Like, for example, when you ragdoll into a puddle of water and immediately bounce up, you know, it's kind of nice sometimes to get that super fast stand up, but it does look very wonky when that happens, and I do think they found a nice balance here, and it was a really good change and made ragdolling feel a bit better. But one of the changes I am not hype about at all is unfortunately the changes to stun weapons. Particularly with the pummeler and the pacifier, they both have a 3-second stun duration now, which is a good change. This is a positive change that I feel positive about. Once you get the stun off, this allows you time to swap to a secondary to finish the enemy off, or a support weapon, or even reposition or reload. However, the change I'd like to talk about is that they listed that they slightly increased the stun buildup of these weapons, and they didn't give us any context here. So what exactly changed, and how exactly does stun buildup work? So basically any stun weapon, we will use the pummeler as an example, has an assigned stun buildup per bullet. Now, before this patch, the pummeler had 1.25 stun buildup. So every time you shoot an enemy, you basically transfer 1.25 stun buildup to them. And a small piece of context, but as soon as you put stun buildup on an enemy, if you stop shooting them, it immediately starts going down over time. Even if you keep shooting them, it starts going down. So when I shoot an enemy with one bullet of a pummeler, I give them 1.25 stun buildup. And let's say a half a second later, now they only have 1 stun buildup on them. So basically with the pummeler, you need to shoot them multiple times to actually get the stun off. So now let's talk about an enemy such as an alpha commander. Alpha commanders require 6 total stun buildup before they are fully stunned. And now that you understand this, you can kind of just look at it as the same as damage breakpoints. So the pummeler does 1.25 stun per shot. Alpha commanders require 6 stun buildup to stun them, and 6 divided by 1.25 is 4.8, meaning it takes the pummeler 5 shots to stun them. Since you obviously have to round up, you can't shoot a 0.8 of a bullet. So what exactly did change in the patch? Well, they buffed the 1.25 stun buildup on the pummeler and the pacifier all the way up to 1.5 stun buildup, basically a 20% buff. So the question here is, what does this change? Well, 6 over 1.25 was 4.8, which means 5 shots, but 6 over 1.5 is 4, so you would think it would only take 4 shots instead of 5. However, the problem here is that stun buildup instantly dissipates over time. So using a weapon like the pummeler, it still takes 5 shots to stun. And like I said, you can kind of look at this as the same as damage breakpoints, and with the way fall off damage works. Like if you're at a certain range, you get fall off damage, and it'll still take an extra bullet in some cases. So if I just pull up the enemy spreadsheet here and keep in mind that the pummeler and pacifier do 1.5 stun buildup now, if we go to warriors, for example, you can see that warriors require 2 stun before they're actually stunned. So the change from 1.25 to 1.5 does nothing for warriors. And if we just look at other enemies like the brood warrior, it takes 2 stun buildup. Hunters actually take 2 stun buildup. Scroll down to hive guards, they take 2 stun buildup. Brood commanders and alpha commanders are 6 stun buildup, which I've already explained. Nothing changes from 1.25 to 1.5 if an enemy requires 6, because of basically the stun dissipation. On a nursing spewer, where it requires stun 8, if you do the math, it actually requires 1 less bullet. I think it's 6 bullets for a nursing spewer instead of 5. If I do quick maths in my head, I think last patch it was 7. And same with bile spewers that require 8. And the last relevant enemy is stalkers. If stalkers require 7 stun buildup, and if we do 7 over 1.25, it used to take 6 bullets in a solo lobby last patch, but 7 over 1.5 Now it only requires 5 bullets. Now looking at some of the other enemies, the basic infantry raider requires 2 stun buildup, so it requires 2 shots of a pummeler or a pacifier to stun this enemy, when you can oftentimes just kill them in 1 to 2 shots if you hit the head, or just 2 shots to the body. Rocket striders require 8 stun buildup, so it takes 1 less bullet due to this change. Devastators take 6, so there was no change here. Berserkers take 6, so there was no change here. And if we even take a look at Voteless, they actually don't have the stun values for Voteless, but if you go in game, Voteless require 2 shots to stun. You can't even stun a Voteless in 1 shot of a pummeler or a pacifier. Now, the reason why they buffed stun in the first place was because of my video showing the problem with the Force of Law Warbond. Stun effects were basically tripling or even quadrupling their buildup in squad games because it was stunning enemies like Alpha Commanders in 2 shots last patch, even though it is supposed to be taking 5 shots if you do the math on it. And Arrowhead fixed that bug this patch with status effects now applying properly across solo and squads. And what they had said in the video was they wanted to buff their stun buildup to meet in the middle.
So we're gonna pull up some things for the solo player, and the result will probably be like for 3 and 4 player lobbies that status effects are now applied a bit slower, but we buff so for solo players it will apply faster than before. So we kind of meet in the middle.
Now, the problem with this is basically everyone who was saying the Force of Law Warbond was good was pretty much playing in squads, and everyone who was saying it was bad went, to a lower level or to test the gun solo. However, their reactions to the Warbond based on their solo testing was far different from people who were just immediately hopping into squad games with the weapons, because the people in squad games had 300 to 400% stun buildup. I'm not sure exactly which one it was, because both of these stun buildups require 2 shots to stun almost every mob in the game. And the compensation and meeting in the middle for this 300 to 400 stun buildup, Arrowhead decided a 20% buff would be enough. So simply put, this is just an overall nerf to the effectiveness of these weapons. Now, the reason for this and the ultimate problem with stun in this game is constantly highlighted by the community. I constantly see people say, why stun if I can just kill? Now, when the pummeler first dropped, it was stunning things in about 3 shots, like medium enemies like Devastators. It was taking about 3 shots to stun them. And I was still having people say, why stun when I could just kill? And I was defending against this constantly because the pummeler is probably my favorite gun in the game. But the thing is, this question is actually completely reasonable. The difference is, if there is a good answer to this question in the game, then it will translate well to the gameplay. But if there's not a good answer to this question, then these stun weapons are just not going to feel that great unless you just happen to like that playstyle. Now, what is a good answer to this question? Well, simply put, if I can kill a warrior head in 2 shots of a non-stun weapon, then why would I want to pick a stun weapon to only stun that warrior in 2 shots, and then I have to fire more bullets to kill them or find another way to kill them? And a warrior is a tiny enemy, but I'm just using it as an example here to say that if it takes the same amount of bullets to stun an enemy as it does to kill them with a non-stun weapon, then, in that case, why stun when I can just kill? And the simple answer is it needs to be easier to stun an enemy than it is to kill it. The pummeler and pacifier should really only take 1 shot to stun any small enemies in the game. Warriors, hunters, hive guards, voteless, raiders, etc. They should 1 burst all medium enemies, alpha commanders, devastators, overseers, stalkers, berserkers, etc. And then they should probably be 2 burst stunning heavier elite enemies, chargers, hulks, and harvesters, because being able to 2 burst stun enemies like that would be the edge over non-stun weapons that just simply do higher DPS. And all of this basically requires a stun build-up value of 3.0, which would basically be a 250% buff from their old solo stun values last patch. This would be a true meet in the middle of the bugged squad values that were giving 300 to 400% instead of a measly 20% buff. A 250% buff would meet in the middle. Now, for some extra context here, the squad stun buildup also affected all stun items in the game, that are not commonly talked about, like the Arc Thrower, the Tesla Tower, the Stun Lance, the One True Flag, the Arc Dog Backpack, and just any other arc item or weapon or stun item or stun weapon. So for example, the Arc Thrower and the Tesla Tower no longer one-shot stun chargers or hulks in squads, or solo for that matter, and Tesla Towers pretty much completely get run over by chargers again. So the ultimate problem with all stun items in this game, including the grenades, which we are going to talk about the Urchin next, is that they just have worse stun breakpoints than non-stun weapons have damage breakpoints. So let's go ahead and talk about the Urchin. They gave the ability for the Urchin to stagger basically just Bile Titans. I think Bile Titan is really the only relevant enemy for this change. I know Impalers get staggered, but not if their tentacles are in the ground. Now, personally, I will say I do think this is a cool change. I like watching Bile Titans get staggered around. It gives me old Railgun versus Bile Titan vibes when it used to stagger them. I don't think this change will make everyone start bringing Urchin all of a sudden, but I do think this will make certain people bring them, and I will also bring them against bugs once in a while because I actually do kind of like the look of this, and it's somewhat useful, and it is pretty fun. With that being said, though, this grenade definitely falls into the same issue as other stun weapons. It virtually has no benefit over the other grenade weapons. The stagger actually just makes the Bile Titans move around, and they're harder to hit headshots on. And I just have to ask the simple questions: why are Bile Titans still stun immune? When stun grenades first came out, you used to be able to stun Bile Titans, and it was pretty cool in my opinion. But we have way other amazing grenade options nowadays. Gas grenades, thermites, pyrotechs, just to name some of the three. And stun grenades virtually have no benefit over anything else unless you simply want to use them. Now, I get that maybe they wanted to make Bile Titans stun immune because they did come out with a weapon like the de-escalator, and if you just rapid fire a de-escalator into a Bile Titan, maybe they didn't want it stunning it. But I do have a simple solution for this. You can simply just make Bile Titans require some absurd number like 500 stun value and just give the Urchin the ability to apply 500 stun value. And then you can give Orbital EMS the same sort of utility. Just give it enough stun value that is absurdly higher than the other stun items in the game because it's a stratagem, and allow it to stun larger enemies such as Bile Titans. And same on the bot side of things. Tanks and Factory Striders are just completely stun immune, and they are also stagger immune for that matter, so Urchin really did nothing there. And while I definitely understand an enemy like a Factory Strider not getting stunned, I do also think that making those choices will just limit items like the Urchin, or stratagems like the Orbital EMS. And same with the stun pods for that matter. All right, so next up, let's just talk about the One True Flag. Now, they actually stealth nerfed all melee weapons to not be able to go through charger leg armor anymore. This was honestly the one edge use case that made melee weapons fun and gave players a reason to use them who enjoyed them. Now, for what it's worth, melee weapons are pretty decent against squids, I can't even lie, and even sometimes on bots if you're feeling a bit risky. I know I liked running behind hulks and stunning them with the stun lance. It was super fun to pull off, and people always questioned my secondary choice even though they watched me do this. Now, I did look through the patch notes again, and this is just completely unlisted, and honestly what I have to say about this is I do not care if a pointy spear with a flag on the end being able to stun through a charger leg armor breaks your immersion or realism with this game. It is a support weapon. It is a single target weapon. It's close range, it's risky, and it's honestly a detriment when you bring it. And in my opinion, the overwhelming sense of democracy is already proven to be able to break realism in this game because we have Democracy Protects. And because of Democracy Protects, there is already a precedent set where overwhelming shows of democracy can break realism. You can literally cheat death if you believe in democracy hard enough. So give the One True Flag some ridiculous AP, give the flag a team buff, give it an expendable cooldown so I can plant the flag, buff mine and my teammates' fire rate, or give us all health regen, and then I can pick up my stalwart and start blasting while raising another Super Earth flag on the Raise the Flag mission. Okay, moving on again, let's talk about the fire grenade changes to the regular impact and the impact incendiary. The fire on the ground from these grenades feels like it just lasts an absurdly long time now, and these are pretty strong for mobbing, especially bug breaches, where bugs often just come out at the same point, and also for hordes of voteless. Now, the incendiary impact, I believe, lasts 15 seconds, while the regular incendiary grenades last about 20 seconds. This is honestly a very long time. I think something like the orbital gas strike also lasts for 15 or 20 seconds. So in my opinion, these are just solid options if you want a good mobbing grenade. Now, the changes to the flame sentry were also really great. They gave it an actual fire resistance so it doesn't destroy itself, and they gave it a pretty short cooldown. Personally, I don't think I'll be bringing the flame sentry a lot because of the really short range. I think I'll try bringing it more on squids if we get another squid major order and I end up going there. Because chargers on the bug side just run over the flame sentry a lot, and the range is not really good enough for bots. But I do have to say both of these changes were pretty solid. Okay, so next let's talk about chest hemorrhaging. I don't think this is a popular change at all. I've seen some comments floating around saying that they created this problem so that people will use the Force of Law armor, but I actually think it was the other way around. I think the Force of Law armor set reminded them that chest hemorrhaging basically does 0 damage in this game because most squads run Vitality Booster, rounding the chest damage down to 0. I will also say I did think it was weird to have a mechanic in this game, such as bleed out from the chest, that just did nothing. So, like, personally, I'm okay with this change. I know every time you take a bit of damage, you stim in this game, so bleeding might as well be non-existent anyway. But, like, in my opinion, I do just think it's a bit weird that you have, like, bleeding and then it just does 0 damage to you. It kind of doesn't make any sense. Now, what I will say in regards to this change is that if you're not running the Vitality Booster or one of the chest hemorrhaging armor sets, the damage you take from bleeding out is insane. It is literally a death sentence. If you have no stims, you are going to die. And even in a lot of cases, when you do have stims, if you're not running Vitality Booster, you will probably still die anyway, because if your chest broke, you did take a decent bit of damage. And I will again say that Vitality Booster is truly the only booster in the game that should be made base game, because it is constantly balanced around, and most of the damage in the game feels unfair without it, because they're aware of its existence. I don't care what people say about health pot optimization or stamina. I don't even think those boosters need to be made base game, because Vitality is the only booster in the game that they have constantly balanced around. Okay, and next we have some changes to Scout Striders and Overseers, making them more accessible to light pen weapons. First of all, yes, the Rocket Strider legs are also light armor pen now. In general, if you're above difficulty 8 though, and fighting against Rocket Striders, you should aim for the rockets with light pen weapons. They did make the Rocket Strider legs pretty dang durable. They're honestly not worth shooting with light pen weapons, in my opinion. Probably not even with medium pen weapons like the Lib pen now, just because I did notice they made it pretty durable. So if you have the Lib pen, you still want to go for the rocket or go for the crotch. However, if you're in a pinch or the rockets got destroyed, you can now shoot the legs out with light pen. And this is just a good change, as bots were already a faction where light pen was pretty good against if you can hit your shots. And honestly, I welcome any changes that hurt the cult of medium pen. Overseers, on the other hand, seem significantly better to shoot their chest with light pen weapons. So basically, after you destroyed the chest armor on the Overseer, their flesh underneath was still light armor pen. And this basically meant that light pen weapons aiming at the chest got a 35% damage penalty, since it is matching armor pen. But now that they are unarmored, it feels way better to aim at their chests, and they're actually quite killable now with light pen weapons aiming directly at the chest. I tried this briefly on stream with the Pummeler, and that is one of the light pen weapons that has some of the lower DPS because it is a stun weapon, but it actually felt pretty solid to kill them with. So if it felt pretty solid to kill them with a Pummeler, I can imagine something like the Lib Carbine, or even the Tenderizer will feel way better to use on Overseers now, just going straight for the chest. And finally, they stealth changed the sound of the Stalwart, and it sounds very airy or like metallic-y or something. I would rather this one got changed back. I think that this one is actually a nerf, because I really liked the sound of the Stalwart beforehand, and I figured I'd just let you guys hear this before we end the video. So those are all the notable things in the patch. I didn't mention everything in the patch. I just wanted to mention the stuff that I thought was notable. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'll see you guys next time. I'm out.